Hello, hello, hello. How's it going? And we're live? Yes, probably. Hello, Retro Gamer. How are you doing? Hopefully everyone can hear me. Didn't have too much time trying to figure this out. It's been a while since I've streamed. I think everything should be in order. So, how's everyone doing? I did get some warnings about the bitrate dropping. Or now it's good though. Hopefully it'll keep that way. There's some really bad weather here, so normally shouldn't have any effect on either the power grid or the data grid, but you never know. Anyways, so welcome to the first of at least two Skyrim work streams where we will be watching Skyrim videos and commenting on them in order to kind of figure out this whole common sentiment, I guess. So Skyrim seems like it's either a very hated game or a very loved game. A lot of people with a lot of opinions. Not just Skyrim, but the entire series. But the people that get views are either overwhelmingly positive or overwhelmingly negative. Personally, I'm more of the negative type because I have actually played other games than Skyrim before. But more on that in the video, I suppose. Right now though, let's see if I can move this window a bit over here. I found some videos that might be able to help us on our way to understanding the discourse around the game. The first one we're gonna have a look at is I Was Wrong About Skyrim by Thane Bishop. So from the start, seems more like someone who played Skyrim, was dissatisfied, and then played Skyrim a completely different way and ended up really liking the game. Hopefully, and this is kind of what I want to gain with this, is a different perspective than, pure hate, pure love. Hopefully, he'll be able to put his feelings into words. Hopefully, we'll actually learn something while watching this. But, well, there's only one way to find out, I suppose. And that's by starting the video. So, let's go.
For a really long time, I regarded Skyrim as a game that was a decent foundation but fundamentally underdeveloped. For any strength it had, it was undercut by the constant need for mods to finish out the systems within the game.
Do tell me if the audio is weird. It's kind of hard troubleshooting this on your own.
Perk tree overhauls like Ordinator or Adamant, combat overhauls like Wildcat. If there's a system for it in Skyrim, somewhere out there is a mod to improve it. These mods always felt required to me and were evidence of the age-old claim that Skyrim is incredibly wide and frustratingly shallow. And while I don't disagree with that, I've recently realized I wasn't giving the game full credit, and that realization starts with a man named Juve. Juve is a content creator here on the platform that primarily specializes in challenge runs in Bethesda games. Fallout, but no leaving this island. Skyrim, but I'm stuck to the road. Fallout, and trying to build a home in the glowing sea. You get the point. The challenge that matters here today is a video from back in April of last year, wherein Juve adapted the...
That's not Skyrim, that's RuneScape. Okay, but so like challenges, like game challenges, self-imposed challenges. What's your opinion on that? I mean, it's kind of setting your own rules, which I guess games like Skyrim could work with. But on the other hand, you're also limiting yourself to like a small subset, often a small subset of what you can actually do in the game, right? So I guess what I'm asking is that a look into how good the game can be, or is that a look into how good you yourself make the game, or tailor it to your own preferences? I don't know, something that I guess you could think about.
Concept of an Iron Man playthrough from old school RuneScape into Skyrim. For those uninitiated with the escaping of runes, an Iron Man playthrough is a set of restrictions that you can place on your account, wherein you cannot trade with other players or use the in-game auction house. There's a few different varieties. Hardcore gives your account a single life, Ultimate takes away your ability to use a bank, that kind of stuff. Juve took this format and made a version intended for Skyrim with much the same vibe. Permadeath, no storing items, no vendors, no looting bodies for equipment or consumables, and your only enchantments are those that you can disenchant from non-unique quest rewards. It seemed a neat idea, and I was having a good time watching until I got to a point in the video where I watched Juve make a potion and I thought to myself, oh, that's funny. I've never made a potion before.
That's probably because you don't really need to make potions. I mean, by like the minimal amount of searching, you'll find a lot of potions.
And then I ran to my computer to start Skyrim. Now, let's be clear for a second, I've probably made a potion before. I have hundreds of hours in Skyrim. I would be shocked if I hadn't at some point taken some flowers and some wheat and mushed them into a paste. What I really mean is that I've never valued the system for making potions before. I've never gone into a session of Skyrim intending to use alchemy. I've never started a new character thinking about the benefit that system will bring that character. And I honestly think the reason for that is pretty simple. I've never needed or wanted to. And alchemy wasn't a lone system in this regard. There are a lot of systems in Skyrim that I routinely neglect because I either find them tedious or unnecessary. Systems that range from secondary at best to I don't even know why this exists. Systems that I would never use or rely on. But what if I did? What if the rules of Skyrim were changed so that I had to? What would the game look like if these elements and systems I always overlooked were suddenly the most valuable systems the game had to offer me? Well, that would be the point of the video, I suppose. Over the course of a few attempts, I adapted and amended the rule set presented by Juve into a format for myself and gave it a try. The changes I made were pretty simple. I kept the permadeath, kind of, we'll talk about it. I kept the lack of vendors and looting of equipment and consumables. I declined survival mode, but I did use mods to give my character a random start and strip them of all of the normal starting spells.
Okay, wait. Alright, so he's not...
I declined survival mode, but I did use mods to give my character a random start and...
Right, this right here. I think during my main quest playthrough, I think I only kept to rule 2. Not that I followed any of this, right? but like just the only thing I didn't really do was trade with vendors because, well, and the yeah, because I didn't have to. I probably bought a couple of luck picks, but even then, maybe 5. Because, well, I didn't need to. I found everything I needed from enemies, killing enemies, or just searching the places, houses, caves, for stuff. Not even really searching, just looking around, basically. So, yeah. For this run in particular, I think rule number 3 is probably the rule that affects the game the most, other than permadeath, of course.
And strip them of all of the normal starting spells. I kept the same basic rules for enchanting, plus a little...
Oh, hey, he has more rules. Yeah,
later, and I also made the call that the only place I could do any kind of storage would be a player-built house from the Hearthfire DLC. So...
yeah, basically none of those things I did. I almost followed all of his rules by mistake. That's fun.
I made the call that the only place I could do any kind of storage would be a player-built house from the Hearthfire DLC. So, how did it go? My relationship with alchemy has always been pretty neglectful, and I don't really blame myself for that. With the game giving every character a healing spell by default, making potions accessible at shops in every town, and basically filling every dangerous locale with at least a few of them, there weren't really a lot of places where I even considered that making my own potions could be worth my time, especially considering the hassle of running around the world and collecting all of the ingredients I would need for them. It seemed like a poor use of time, so I never dedicated time towards it. Now, obviously there's more to potions in Skyrim than just healing. There's magicka and stamina, but I never really felt any pain from letting those recharge at their own pace. There's poisons, which, given that they only apply for a single hit by default, always seemed more like a whole lot of menuing around for not a whole lot of value. And there's temporary buffs too, like potions that increase your damage with a weapon type for a set amount of time. The main problem for those is that I've just never put too much value into temporary effects. I don't enjoy the micromanaging, the set time frame to complete a thing in, I don't enjoy the idea of an effect wearing off while I'm in the middle of using it, and most critically, what if I need that potion later? I should probably just hold on to it until, oops, I've beaten the game and still have like 45 of them.
Ah, yes, the RPG sickness. The RPG hoarding sickness. It strikes every single time.
You get the vibe. Here's what changed, though, with this playthrough. Under the rules that I played with, I had no starting spells, no access to healing. These little blue flowers would be the basis of my salvation and would remain as such even after finding restoration spell tomes in the wild. And because of this, I've made more potions in the last 2 weeks just playing around with this rule set with my live stream audience than I have in the previous 13 years of playing this game. This meant that I was aware of my character in a way that I never have been before. So much thought went into keeping this stupid idiot alive, an amount of attention I have never paid to basically any other character in any other game, and it all started with alchemy. Every single quest, and everything that wasn't a quest, was always preceded by an alchemy-based vibe check. And it wasn't just me checking my pockets for how many potions I had.
So like what, is he playing The Witcher 1 now? Is that it? Potions galore?
I started counting up the total banked health that my collection could offer me, and this is when I also started to appreciate alchemy as a skill, not just a mechanic, because getting to see my banked health go from around 200 to over 1,000 in some instances inspired a level of bravery bordering on fanatical as my potions got stronger as my skill got higher. And if alchemy was just good for health, honestly, I feel like I would have gotten my money's worth, but I actually got so addicted to those temporary damage buffs as well. Having the chance to gain 60 seconds of what essentially felt like superpowers became a core element of my gameplay. And while I thought that I would be annoyed at the micromanaging element of it all, it actually felt pretty seamless. And it turns out 60 seconds of game time is a lot longer than I had thought, and popping a new buff on when one was expiring was really simple. It eventually got to the point where I was putting my 2 main potions on hotkeys in my favorites menu so I could use them without interrupting combat or even opening a menu. There's a lot more I think I could say about my newfound appreciation for alchemy, like how I walked around with a rock joint for 5 hours because I couldn't figure out a cure disease potion because I've never needed to make one before, or how I stopped fast traveling so much because suddenly walking to my objective meant finding important alchemy ingredients, but I think I've talked enough about alchemy and its temporary buffs, so let's talk about something more permanent. I think smithing becomes the natural second element to focus on in this rule set because we have to make everything ourselves. And this actually involved me in a full chain of actions that if you told me you did on a normal part of your everyday Skyrim gameplay, I don't think I would ever believe you. Because it's a style of gameplay that isn't just upgrading your gear with the relevant ingots, it's going into the mines yourself and collecting the ore there. It means keeping track of what ore respawns in which mines at what time, and it involves more than just gathering up some iron and throwing together your first set of armor because you'll need to routinely invest in upgrading your setup. But in truth, this was inspired by old school RuneScape fashion.
I mean, yeah, sure. I guess using smithing to upgrade yourself is nice, but the problem with the smithing, I feel like, is that it works exactly like RuneScape. You go to some mining outpost, you mine a lot of ore, go to the smithy, the blacksmith, and then level up your skill from there. And well, there are limits to how much material you can carry, and it also goes pretty slow, just like in RuneScape. So we all know that the whole smithing daggers, iron daggers thing, just a skill up. But like I've tried playing around a little bit with smithing, but it just took so long. If they had to be inspired from RuneScape, then they truly picked the wrong thing to get inspiration from.
This means needing to grind out your smithing to keep unlocking access to higher levels of gear. Here's where I ended up in that endeavor. My plan was pretty much identical to the one used by Juve in his own video. Inside Halted Stream Camp on the outskirts of Whiterun, there is both a transmute ore spell tome, an alteration spell granting you the ability to turn a single piece of iron ore into silver, or silver ore into gold ore, and an absolute mess of iron ore to be mined by hand. The neat thing about gold ore is that 2 of them can be turned into 1 ingot, and 1 gold ingot can be turned into 2 rings, which is a pretty prime, although admittedly very slow to prep, method for leveling smithing. Because transmute ore has a pretty hefty magicka cost at low levels, I could only really use it once before needing to let most of my magicka regenerate, and with my backpack routinely filled with anywhere between 50 to 70 iron ore from all the mines I'd been hitting, this led to 2 different options. I could use the spell, wait for a single in-game hour, and then use the spell again, repeat, or I could just use the spell as I was walking around and traveling throughout the world, which is what I did. I still used fast travel when it made sense, but for the first time, this sort of interaction is what got me invested.
Then the
in
weather
just
is
walking
bad.
around the game. Collecting flowers and transmuting ore. I never would have guessed, you know? But here I am on the other side. I've worked all the way up to 50 smithing on my current character, crafting and subsequently retiring older sets of iron, steel, and Dwemer armor, and I'm currently enjoying the benefits of a set of orcish armor that I made myself. And in doing so, I've developed a deeper appreciation for the world, both in wandering around to find the different mines in the game, and also just enjoying my time spent walking around it. And as a special bonus, I've also filled a chest with gold rings that I've made myself that are now just waiting for the chance to be enchanted. Which is kind of a difficult one, actually. Enchanting becomes an interesting system when viewed through this lens. The literal act of enchanting is already difficult with the restricted access to the soul trap spell and your only soul gems being those you can find in the wild, but with a rule set restricting
Or mined in the below ground, I think, right?
access to enchantments to just those that can be taken from non-unique quest rewards, this turns the entire system into not just a reason to travel the land and complete quests for different factions and jarls, but it also turns it a bit into this, like, casino minigame, I suppose. Every time I finished a quest that would give me an enchanted item, it was a genuine edge-of-my-seat moment. Any one of these effects could seriously change the game for me, but if we're being honest, the excitement of getting a new enchantment often paled in comparison to the reality of the enchantment I did get. Sort of like how opening a loot box is more fun than the thing inside the loot box. Combined with how few chances the game actually gives you to get enchanted items with this rule set, I ended up not really thinking about enchantments all that much. In truth, I feel this rule set probably restricts enchantments more than I like, and so it feels that the benefits you would normally look towards enchanting for end up getting loaded onto alchemy. That said, it does turn the occasional miracle into this huge moment, like how the very first enchantment I got from Balgruuf was a smithing effect, even if I did die and lose it before I even got to use it. Despite my under-reliance on it for this playthrough so far, I'm still left with a newfound appreciation for it. Something that I typically take for granted now feels like a much bigger deal, and it still helped bolster my immersion in the game by encouraging me to pay more attention to quests and the people involved with them. I was already traveling the land so much to make other systems work, it only made sense to stop in at every new town and see what the local faction could potentially offer me. And honestly, it was still kind of fun, because it meant trying to find value out of things I wouldn't normally use, stuff like taking less damage from power attacks. In a game where there's dozens of ways to take damage, getting a reduction from just one of those doesn't feel phenomenal, but this isn't really a game mode about feeling phenomenal. This is a game mode about staying alive and doing what we can with the limited resources available in that regard. It's about the forced creativity.
Damn, I didn't even get notified that you were live. Well, now you know. Welcome, Salty.
Of restricted options, and
how's it going?
My favorite part, I still think that's important. I kinda think that's what this was all about. Under the Iron Man rule set, spells, magic, effects, whatevers, gain a whole lot of value.
Bro, using that modded footage?
Even on top
Yeah.
of what they already had.
It doesn't seem like it's too modded though, right?
Given the ability to remove the game's default start
I mean, who would use modded footage for an Elder Scroll video?
spells, it means that the only spells we're able to use are from spell tomes we find in the wild. Real talk for a second? I think this is the best thing about this run. It got me thinking, it got me crafty, it got me working really hard to make the most of a limited resource without restricting access to that resource to such a degree that I just chose not to use it, and it got me pursuing new things to try and grow my magic skills. There are 3 main places to find these tomes. First, some just spawn naturally. Sparks can always be found in the Helgen dungeon.
It's going good though, You're very welcome.
Transmute or
Okay, so I kind of get this whole challenge run thing, but ultimately I don't think you have to do that much. I mean, I literally did not do anything but loot enemies in the main quest playthrough, and I still got through pretty easily.
Or always spawns in Halted Stream. If you go to Fort Amol, you can always find
So you don't really have to interact with alchemy or smithing or enchanting. I mean, I guess you could, but I just don't see the point. Kind of.
Oh. Alright, quick aside. In this rule set, if you want to use a bow, in general, you need to make your own arrows. And I ruled that you can't even get them back because that would count as looting a dead body. And so by making it expensive to play with a bow, and strategically and purposefully avoiding bound bow, I feel like I've actually been enjoying a new playstyle where Stealth Archer just isn't mechanically viable. It's been really nice. Anyway.
Yeah, Skyrim doesn't ever get hard, it just gets tedious. My biggest issue was running out of inventory space because I was carrying 50 pounds of healing potions, right? And like, and those are just potions you find out in the wild too. Like usually you don't even really have to, you don't really have to craft anything. I mean, I basically just used weapons and armor I found off of people I killed. I never bought anything. I didn't even do any particular quests for any super rewards. I mean, actually, you know what? Let me see if I can't do something here. All right. I'm gonna try and launch Skyrim right now. And I'll show you. I'll show you my setup at the end of Dragonborn. Ooh, that is loud, isn't it? Plus, game capture, I guess. Okay. Capture any full screen application. Wait, hang on. Transform. Fit to screen. There we go. We're gonna maybe no. It's locked. Why is it locked? Maybe I just need to open the window. Fuck, okay. No? Not at all? Falber, Draugr, and Forsworn are the only enemies I remember being particularly difficult past level 30-ish. I never got past 30, or I haven't yet, at least. So, oh hey, there it is. Hey Skyrim, how you doing? Now I can resize you. There we go. There we go. Alright, now let me show you the glory, yes, Jub. Saint Jub. And this is great, because I don't think I even picked up a single piece of equipment during Dragonborn either. Yeah, the scaling is more noticeable on them when their health and damage starts inflating. Let's see. Let's go to weapons. So, ebony sword, ebony war axe. That's basically what I found. I have an elven sword of devouring. And yeah, that's basically it. I have a supple ancient Nordbow. It's horrible. It's not even none of this is even enchanted, right? And for armor, now this is the fun part. I equipped the Amulet of Talos just so I could shout more often. Then I have an elven armor. I have hide bracers of major wielding, which I guess the enchantment is good, I guess. Leather boots of lifting just to increase my carrying capacity. And then the Nakreen mask, ring of wielding, and that's pretty much it. Am I not wearing pants? Wait. Hang on. I am wearing pants. Where are my pants? Is that a... Oh, it's the elven armor. It's like a full body thing. Are there even pants? I don't think there are pants in this game. Alrighty, I just want to pop in and say hi. I've got a pretty stacked day, so I'm heading out. Good luck with stream, and hopefully none of the reviews give you an aneurysm. Well, thank you for stopping by. I appreciate it. And they probably won't. Though I'm gonna cross my fingers for that. See you later, dude. Actually, something else I wanted to check, you know, while we're here, is I saved my level ups for dicey situations, because whenever you go to the level up screen, your health is refilled. Everything just completely resets. Right now I'm level 14. If I go to the level up screen, (15, 16, 17, 18, 19. I leveled 5 levels. That's how long it's been since I've actually visited the level up screen. And still, I didn't have any problem defeating Mirok either. But, you know, that's Skyrim for you, I guess. But yeah, that's basically all I wanted to show off. Let's continue with a stupid video.
The second place to find spell tome would be in boss chests. At the end of most dungeons, you'll have a small chance of pulling a spell tome from one of these big chests. Cool stuff, and it really incentivizes that classic Skyrim experience of clearing random dungeons just to see what's on the far end, even if you can't use all the rewards, but it also tapers it by always keeping in mind how many of what kind of resource you're using to clear a dungeon. There is a solid risk-reward ratio to the magic gained and resources used in this game mode that I've never experienced before, and I've had a lot of fun with it. Finally, any mage-type enemies, people with stuff like Conjurer in their name, have a small chance of dropping a tome on death, and this was where it got really spicy. Fun fact, magic damage in Skyrim is not reduced by your armor, only magic resistance effects, which don't come native to most characters. This makes fighting a group of mages feel more akin to being stalked by raptors in this game mode. No joke, my first character died in 2 shots to a random event Atronach. Mages will shred you if you're not careful, but they're also your best bet at unlocking spells. The coolest thing this did for me in this game mode is it got me thinking about game mechanics in a way I never have. I know that lightning spells drain magicka, but I never cared about that unless it was happening to me. But with Sparks as my only damage spell early on, this build ended up developing into this really fun rush-down battle mage, where I could use my own spell to leave mages with no resources and then run them down with a sword the size of their body. Honestly, incredible gameplay. Spell tomes are rare, but it always felt great to win one from a mage. Now, I have been lying to you a little bit, because there's actually a secret 4th place for spells to be found. It requires access to the college, but it kind of changes everything. I kind of suspect that there's a decent amount of people who don't even really know that the Atronach Forge exists, and others that won't really know what it's good for. And a real part of that is that the Atronach Forge isn't really good for anything, at least not in a normal playthrough. The ability to create a Soul Trap spell tome, or the Book for Flame Atronach, is kind of a weird thing to be able to do here. You can buy those spells from vendors pretty early on in your journey. It's only in a playthrough like this where the ability to make your own spell tomes by combining the right ingredients really matters.
Wait.
As far as I'm aware...
You can do that? Why? I'm having trouble understanding what the actual use of this would be. Because like even that one guy out in the tavern in Winterhold, he'll just sell you like a bunch of spell tomes for pretty cheap, I think, too. Or maybe he's expensive. I don't know. I haven't really messed with magic yet, but I mean, And gold isn't exactly something you're gonna have, like, not a lot of. You're going to have a lot of gold.
This right here is the only place in the entire game that you can get reliable access to the Soul Trap spell tome with this rule set. But the more important thing is that the Atronach Forge can be used to get enchantments. Now, this isn't in the rule set laid out at the beginning because I'm literally learning about it right now as I write these words, but it's an immediate amendment to the rule set because you can craft enchanted Daedric pieces at the Forge. We can't make weapons with this rule set because they require silver weapons as a component and those can't be crafted, but we can acquire all of the pieces needed to make enchanted Daedric armor, which I'm going to say we can disenchant. Because the main trade-off for that is that, you need 90 conjuration to make it work, since these recipes require the sigil stone. It certainly makes enchantments a bit more of an endgame thing, but that's also when you need them most. God, this section on magic is really starting to drag on. And speaking of dragons, shouts. I've never given a shit about them before. I will maybe fus or da a fella if it's convenient, or if I remember that I can, but I genuinely spend most of my playtime forgetting that the main snowflake mechanic of Skyrim even exists. But here, in this playthrough where magic is rare and trying to manage my magicka bar is important, holy shit, I am addicted to these words of power. You mean I get access to a massive pool of magical abilities with wild varieties and they don't even require the same resource as the rest of my spells?
I'd argue that the most important resource it's going to drain you of is time, since some of the cooldowns are pretty long.
That alone makes these shouts worth literally any amount of effort to get them. For the first time in 13 years, I asked the Greybeards where I could find a new word of power and then went to find it. I am genuinely so hooked on this mechanic right now. Using Become Ethereal to overcome huge drops, using Unrelenting Force to use gravity to my advantage, using Flame Breath to put an enemy on the back foot before we rush in. I genuinely am at risk of making the call to go on some kind of Dragon Scholar pilgrimage to find every single word in the game. This is such a fun kind of magic, and I cannot believe it took me this long to use it, but I'm so happy that I finally am. And in fact, there's a lot of effects in Skyrim that kind of fall into the same category for me. Elements of this game that I really paid attention to that I normally would gloss over in my typical playthrough. Stuff like the Standing Stones. Typically, I would just pick one of these three that best suits the vibe of what I was feeling for any given playthrough and then forget about them. But here, I was actually strategically swapping out the stone I was using to better suit what I was doing. Like switching from the Mage Stone to the Lord Stone for its passive reduction to magic damage when I went to go take on the Potema questline, leading me to a dungeon full of mages. And while temporary swappable effects are cool, even cooler still are permanent ones. Fun fact, did you know that if you help the goddess Mara make some of her favorite ships canon, you can just get a flat 15% bonus to magic resistance? It's probably the first thing you should do in any playthrough in general, but it's also the kind of thing that matters way more here than it ever could, at least to me, in a normal playthrough. And on the basis of Mara and love, let's address marriage. Around day 3 of this playthrough, I casually mentioned to my audience that marriage would be a powerful tactical choice because we could turn the plus 10 bonus experience from Well Rested into a plus 15 bonus from Lover's Comfort that would also combine with our Guardian Stone, leading to a massive 35% increase to our gains for like 8 whole in-game hours. In my head, I saw efficient leveling and a strategic game plan to elevate the character, but what happened was a multiple stream, 15-hour battle in my audience over who the best marriage candidate is that involved multiple polls just to see who we would marry on this playthrough. And I actually can't
that sounds about right.
into the script because as I am recording this dialogue, I don't have a winner from those polls yet. Anyways, I married this person on screen right now. They've probably moved in with us by this time, and so now we get a better resting effect when we go home. Speaking of home, building out your own home in old school RuneScape is a pretty massive deal. Player-owned homes have evolved over the last decade from vanity and socialization to perhaps the greatest source of efficient gameplay possible in OSRS. A well-made, effective home is the difference between the very best players and everyone else. So, in this game mode inspired by old school RuneScape, I was curious to see what value I could get out of a house. And the answer is sort of frustrating, because it's a lot, and not a lot yet. You see, by the time you're watching this, I've been working on this character for maybe 20 or 25 hours, assuming that I haven't died between right now and whenever you are. And the house still has a huge amount of work needed before it reaches its potential. So much theoretical value is just not there yet, but this little garden out here is one of the biggest investments I've ever made, because the wheat and blue flowers you can plant here don't just give one per harvest, they give 3 or 4 plant depending. Meaning that every time I came back to the house, I was able to collect enough ingredients to make another 12 potions or so. And at around 50 health each with my current alchemy level, that meant that every journey back to the house, I was banking near 600 health. It was also where I finally hit a bit of a breakaway in terms of my collections and banked experience, since under this rule set, the inside of this home was the only place I could store items. It took nearly 10 hours to get to a place where my inventory and storage stopped being my pants pockets, and this unlocked so much potential. I had never really considered the ability to put an item away as anything special until it suddenly was. This box was the thing that allowed long-term planning to exist. I hadn't been looting dragon bones for hours because the ratio of immediate weight and inventory space consumed to the theoretical eventual payoff was so in favor of leaving them behind that I did that. But now, with this home, I have a growing stash of valuable components just waiting for me to finally hit 100 smithing somehow. And what I'm so excited for still is knowing that there's so much more. I can continue to build out this house, I can continue to make it better, I can continue to make it work for me, and I never think to do that in a normal playthrough because things like this just don't matter to me in a normal playthrough. One of the more subtle elements to Skyrim's landscape of mechanics is the way in which the world scales to your level. The higher your total level, the more dangerous bandits become. Dragons begin spawning in at higher tiers, you see saber cats instead of wolves, etc., etc. There are pros and cons to this system. The most basic pro for it is that it keeps the world...
Oh hey, would you look at that, trying to sneak into the Thalmor embassy. That never works.
As you grow, the world grows too, so you never feel like you're just overpowering the game around you. The immediate downside of this, of course, is that what's the point of growing if you don't actually feel stronger, if encounters still feel largely the same because they've leveled up with you? I think it's worth saying that, at least for me, one of the best feelings in a game like this is getting to go back to a low-level starting area, the places where my...
Man, this really wants to make me play RuneScape.
began, and allowing me to see how far I have come. This playthrough refreshed all of my thoughts on this matter, and drove me a bit deeper into the idea of trying to get the most efficiency out of my levels, because the villains of this game don't care if I'm level 10 because I'm the smoothest talker with my 100 speech, or if I'm the most goodest hammer boy. They're going to swing at me just knowing I'm level 10. And that matters a lot for this kind of playthrough.
Does it really though? Does it really? Because levels don't quite work that way, do they? You can level up from from leveling up any skill 10 times, you get a character level, where you can increase magicka, health, or stamina. So it's and you know, increasing these different stats have other bonus effects. Increasing health gives you more carrying capacity, but they also give you perk points, which you can use pretty much on anything, as long as the skill you're using it on has a high enough level to actually gain the perk. But so I guess the only time that would be relevant is if you've like leveled all the non-combat skills to 100 and your character is like level 30 and you haven't put a single perk or any time into the combat skills. But even then, you'll still find better armor, better weapons, and all that. So you're still going to be able to take more damage and deal more damage. And you'll also gonna probably have potions and all that stuff. So, does it matter? I don't think so.
Trying to keep in step with this world ended up being a way bigger part of my plan than I expected, to the point where I would actually leave behind leveling tomes if I suspected that they would give me a level in a skill I wasn't using. It also meant that anything I did use, I had to fully commit to. Using transmute ore to get gold also got me alteration levels, so it made sense to grab the Oakflesh spell tome from Iverstead. I was going to be getting levels from alteration either way. The world was going to be scaling up as a result of transmute ore, even if it was just in some small way, so I had to make sure I was getting lasting value out of that. I don't really know for sure what other people mean when they talk about Skyrim as immersive, but I think that this is my personal highlight when it comes to considering myself immersed in the game. Thinking about the experience and the systems within it to such a degree that I would turn down free levels and skills just because those skills don't fall into my overall plan for the character. Wandering around the world because it benefits me to do so, both to collect alchemy ingredients and spend the time transmuting, and specifically choosing a race for my character based on their bonuses and what I thought the most difficult part of the game would be under this rule set. And the real core reason I think for why these things worked was permadeath. So good at what you do. I knew it. I even knew it.
Oh,
I had a hard
killed
time
by a
deciding
trap.
if this should be the first point or the final point, because permadeath is the mechanic by which everything else in this game was given new value. This is the most important aspect of this game mode. When death is the end, you treat the game differently. Alchemy matters because I don't have healing spells, and I need to be able to push hard when needed to keep myself alive. Smithing matters because the game scales with me and I need to keep my defense growing to match the new enemies. Enchanting matters because I need every advantage I can get, even if it's small or requires that I play in a way I hadn't intended. Spells are now hyper valuable for being a reliable way to do damage at a distance, permanent effects help keep us alive, and even a 5% increase to the resting bonus gives us a more efficient way to use limited resources. Building out a home matters because it becomes a central hub that I don't want to lose. All of these secondary elements that I typically forego now orbit around and are given immense value by this dark star that is permadeath. There is an odd mix to the danger in Skyrim because it is both a game with an incredible amount of threats and very little consequences for succumbing to those threats. In fact, depending on the amount and types of resources you used in a dungeon, it might sometimes even be better to die, load back to before you use those supplies, and then try it all again. But if death is the end, and dying means deleting your save, suddenly the amount of attention I was paying to basically every other system in the game skyrocketed. I was keeping track of my banked health, I was managing the steroids I got from alchemy, I was specifically using a spark spell to help shut down mages by draining their magic, I was watching for what weapons NPCs were using, I was in deep. Nothing changed my perspective on Skyrim more than permadeath. And if you haven't tried it before, go boot up one of your 4 copies of Skyrim and just give it a few hours. Maybe set the difficulty 1 level higher than you're used to. I genuinely think it might surprise you. And the reason why it worked so well, I think, is that it was the metric by which every other element of this playthrough was given new meaning. And so if you don't totally enjoy it, consider trying out what I did.
I think he has a point. I mean, if you're not having fun with the game, then take steps to make it fun, right? And, you know, to its credit, Skyrim does allow you to make those changes pretty easily. But I think the point still stands that, 1, you don't have to, and 2, the game never truly pushes you into utilizing any of its mechanics without the player needing to put rules, like shackle themselves down with rules for how to play the game. We could probably argue back and forth if this is good game design or not for hours, but undecided, I think.
Sometime around day 4
We'll
of the
say.
stream I was doing for this footage, we had a death that was a real oopsie daisy.
Hey, it's been a while. How have you been? And how was your weekend so far? Hey, Lazy Clay. I've been good. And my weekend so far has been great. Thank you. How about you? It has been a while, yeah, hasn't it? Last stream, I think? Which was, yeah, it was a while ago. Had a nice steak for dinner. It was really good. But it's only the start of the weekend yet so far, so still have plenty of time to make it even better, right?
Easy kind of moment. But myself and my audience had grown really attached to the character we'd been playing, so I took a vote and we amended the rules slightly. A cinematic or properly thematic death was a
My weekend is alright so far, can't complain. That's good to hear.
permanent death. If it was cool, it counted. An oopsie daisy death, on the other hand, prompted penance, leading to what my audience
Oopsie daisy
referred to
death?
as the woodcutter arc. Go to Whiterun, manually cut 100 firewood, and then make the trek to deliver that wood all the way up to the Greybeards. And what I found with this
Wait,
is that
seriously?
even though the penalty for an oopsie daisy death wasn't a full reset, I still really didn't want to die in either case, which is all it took to get me to play the game with a focus on these secondary systems designed to keep me alive. Even with this slightly more casual view on death, I'm still actively engaging with this
Though, he did use a horse. He didn't go on foot, which I think is actually cheating.
game and its world like I've never done before. I'm fully invested and I'm actively having fun. This system, this rule set, this game mode, whatever, is working in a way that I never could have predicted. It is changing my perspective in a way I didn't think possible. And what that means is that if you come to my channel on Tuesday, I will be streaming this character. Not because I need footage anymore, not because it means anything for any of my videos, but because I'm genuinely having so much fun with this game, with this rule set. I could be playing Space Marine 2, I could be out hiking, I could be reading or doing anything else, but right now, my whole hobby brain space is taken up by Skyrim, and the biggest realization of this is the newfound understanding that I'd been wrong about this game. Skyrim is a game with a lot of limitations and things that hold it back. I just never thought that I was one of them until now. I've always been someone who said and firmly believed that Skyrim was a good foundation, the caveat being that you need to conclude that foundation yourself, assumedly with dozens of mods to make a proper final product, and I think that's a pretty agreeable opinion. Because pretty much every other comment on my first Skyrim video, wherein we talk about the shortcomings of the combat system, is talking about, like, just get mods. Use mod, idiot. There are mods that fix this. But, like, we're talking about Skyrim, not the aftermarket third-party add-ons you can get from Nexus. And it honestly blew me away that so many people didn't seem to get the difference between Skyrim and the mods people make for it. Using mods to fix Skyrim is such an inherent thing that it seems like a huge portion of the player base have just forgotten that mods aren't Skyrim. No joke, I had people during my stream ask what mod I was using for the Iron Man challenge itself, as if it didn't occur to some people that the whole playstyle was
My
just
god, mod rot, like mod brain rot. Yeah, people are so accustomed to modding Skyrim that or playing modded Skyrim, and I totally understand them too, because vanilla Skyrim is super boring. So like I said, to this guy's credit, I think he has a good idea. If the game isn't fun, then come up with your own way to make it fun. However, the problems of Skyrim still persists. The shallow combat, the horrible story, the bland as fuck environments. I mean, okay, this is like Shadow Reach. Looks great, but it's like one of 3 places that actually looks good. The rest of Skyrim is just dull and gray and rough. Graphics wise, even today, Skyrim doesn't look too bad. Definitely the best looking, definitely not the best looking game, I suppose, but far from the worst looking game. I mean, it has that realistic style, and I think people only really remember these places. Sovngarde. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's what I thought you meant. I think people only really remember these places, like Sovngarde and Shadowreach, and maybe some of the Dwemer ruins. But as a whole, Skyrim is kind of bleak and boring. I do, which I'm surprised I haven't really heard a lot of people talk about, but I do really like the architecture in the overworld specifically. Like these whole big stone buildings and portals with carvings and stuff. I really like that. But other than that, there's not really much to look at. Apologies for that. No, I got you. Oh man. So I think Oblivion looks better because of the art style. Yeah, Oblivion has like a lot of green and rolling hills and all that. So at least in the overworld, I think Oblivion does look a bit better. I might be biased because of the dungeons, or at least for how similar looking they all are. But I also don't think Oblivion had the same highs as Skyrim does, but I think it's a more stable experience, at least when it comes to looks. Because Skyrim has high highs and low lows, and not really anything in the middle, I feel like. Not a lot, at least. Not a lot as Oblivion. Or, like, Morrowind, for example. Because, like, even if Morrowind was mostly brown and grayish, it still had that alien feel to it. Like, everything was new. For Skyrim, mostly it's just like, oh, hey, I feel like I could find this in the actual world, in the real world. And it's mostly like that in Oblivion too, but the colors and everything makes the game pop more. It is very fantasy-like, and it can be boring. It does get boring after a while, but Skyrim specifically, just like almost immediately, I feel. I haven't finished Skyrim yet, so please correct me on this, but isn't Skyrim going for a more depressing magical art style of sorts? Well, yeah, it's kind of rough around the edges. People are not really dressed well generally. It feels like there's a lot of poverty in the cities. You see a lot of ruined buildings here and there. I haven't really explored a lot of the cities too much at this point, but for the places you go in the main quest, it feels like that a lot. Also, in comparison to Oblivion, Skyrim doesn't really have, or I think Skyrim has more towns and small cities that aren't their own little cells, but they're also smaller than a lot of the cities in Oblivion, even the big ones. And basically, just like the other games, they're like a handful of people in the biggest cities. I don't think there's anything quite like the Imperial City. But then again, the Imperial City should be big, but Skyrim should have like a huge city like that too, I feel like. Because it's old, like it's obviously very old. But I don't know about magical though. It feels more like handcrafted, like manual labor style. A lot of wooden houses and rock carvings and that sort of stuff. You know what? Just occurred to me. Skyrim has a lot of wooden houses for having so little forest. Like usually, when you look at towns and cities and civilization, People will build houses out of surrounding material. But there's really not a lot of lumber in Skyrim. Like big, huge trees that you can actually cut into size. Because, like, old houses, especially like the ones they build in Skyrim, they're like basically one huge like piece of lumber that has notches on it on each side, and then you kind of just alternate between placing them, and then you get a house. And it's actually really sturdy, but it requires a lot of wood. In fact, the art style of Skyrim kind of reminds me of Dragon Age Origins art style. Magical yet hopeless world or something like that. Yeah, well, maybe. I mean, looking at this picture, it looks magical, but this is not a representation of Skyrim as a whole. This is just a very, very small part. Although I haven't finished Dragon Age Origins either, so I could be wrong about that as well. Well, I haven't even played it, so I'm just gonna take your word for it. Anyways, I think that's pretty much all that we're gonna get out of this video. It feels like he does have a point, which I'm probably gonna write down. Props to the guy for making his own fun when the game isn't. What did I say earlier? The core flaws of Skyrim still persists, though. So that was the first video I wanted to take a look at. The second is Why Skyrim by Rasputin.
More often than not.
Ooh, hello. It's another half-hour video. Hopefully this will also give some pointers or a different point of view. That's basically what I'm looking for here. A different point of view to my own. Anyways, yeah, this is ... Why Skyrim by Rasputin.
Skyrim is one of the biggest games of all time. It has received high acclaim from reviewers and players alike, been re-released so many times that I've lost count, and sold over 60 million copies across all platforms. Not all sales data for games is exact or public, as is on the publishers or devs to report it, but of all the information that's out there, this makes it the 8th best-selling game of all time. And what's most impressive about that is that it's one of only 2 games in the top 10 that's single-player only. Since its release, it has been a force to be reckoned with, and has changed the gaming landscape forever. Throughout the years, it's inspired countless artists, memers, video essayists, game developers, and of course modders, all of whom have kept the game alive in various ways. And to this day, it still has a massive player base, averaging around 20,000 concurrent players across its Steam versions alone. It is beloved in a way few games ever are, and I often find myself wondering, why?
Oh, that is loud. Jesus.
The answer I expect a lot of you will have to this question is simply that it's a great game. And, okay, look, I'm not going to claim that everything about Skyrim is terrible. It's not. But there's a lot in it that's really not great. What makes this notable is that some of the stuff that I would say are the worst aspects of the game are also arguably some of the most important. For instance, the combat. It is one of the main pillars of the title, and it's kind of a mess. Melee feels floaty and unresponsive, making it so landing a hit doesn't even feel satisfying.
I want to play all of the other Elder Scrolls games in the future. Elder Scrolls 1 through 4, not ESO, by the way, but not right now for me personally. Yeah. Arena is going to be a challenge, probably. But Daggerfall, I think, is pretty playable, right?
As enemy AI is pretty bare.
The rest of them are modern enough for it to easily work.
Spamming the attack button in the hopes you'll outdamage whatever you're going against. You may occasionally need to block or take a few steps back to avoid a hit, but even then it still ends up being pretty mindless, and can be further trivialized by making or buying a lot of health potions. Magic also feels unsatisfying due to scaling issues and can be incredibly frustrating because of how easy it is to accidentally do damage to allies or just any person hanging around. The latter can be especially annoying, as in some instances it leads to people attacking you. Like when I was doing the vampire quest near Morthal, I had Thonir join me, and whenever I would use Bane of the Undead, the area of effect would hit him too, giving me a bounty and causing him to go after me as if there wasn't a master vampire right in front of us. All in all, while your attack and your defense is more effective, you're never really...
What would be your personal favorite RPG so far? So are you thinking just like in the Elder Scrolls series or in general?
Challenge to engage with the combat any differently by the end than you are at the beginning, creating a flat experience. Another rough spot with the game can be seen with the role-playing itself. While you do have tons of choices in terms of what quests you engage with, more often than not, there aren't all that many interesting choices once you've started a quest line. And in the instances where you are given a choice, it often ends up lacking nuance and suitable options. One of the first...
In general? Alright. Well, I think that's a pretty easy answer. And it has to be Xenoblade Chronicles 3. No question.
Quests players will likely come across is a prime example of this. Upon reaching Riverwood, you come across Sven and Feindal, two inhabitants of the village who are in love with the same woman, Camilla. Whichever one you talk to first...
That's like from the top of my head. Maybe I'd change my mind if I had some time to think. I guess I'll try to think about it a bit more, but just instant reflex, Xenoblade Chronicles 3.
Deliver a fake letter to Camilla filled with rude and heinous things, and then tell her it was sent from the other. From there, you can give her the letter and either lie or tell the truth about who wrote it, or you can show it to the suitor you haven't talked to yet, who will then give you a fake letter of his own to give to Camilla, and also tell you to say it was from the other. Now, once you have both letters, you have to make a choice between who you want to sell out, Sven or Feindal, and this sucks. The quest makes it clear that both these guys are scumbags, but once you reach the point of figuring that out, there is no way to tell Camilla about it. So you either have to pick a side and let her continue to spend time with someone that's manipulating her, or you just do nothing, neither of which feels like a satisfying end if you are trying to play as a mortal.
I didn't know you also played JRPGs until today. How many JRPGs have you played so far? How many? That's a hard question. Basically, I've played basically the entirety of the Xenoblade Chronicles series, including X. Paper Mario series, except Thousand Year Door, Bravely Default, and Bravely Second. Still hasn't played Bravely Default 2. Final Fantasy 6. Oddly enough, not 7 or 10. Also, I played a bit 14, but that's an MMO. The Last Story, you know, that Operation Rainfall Wii game. What else? Well, some. Maybe not a lot, but some JRPGs.
Moral character. And these kinds of decisions are pretty commonplace. More often than not, you are extremely limited in the responses you can have to any given situation, and the options you are...
Oh, Final Fantasy 3, also.
covered, all of which makes it hard to develop any sort of personality for your character. Most of the time, you have to pick between two bad choices.
By the way, congratulations on almost reaching 4K subs. I hope you reach at least 5K by the end of the year. That would be cool. Probably not going to happen, but that would be cool.
These two aspects of the game design feel especially noteworthy because Skyrim is an action role-playing game, yet its action and role-playing are both fairly lackluster. I know some people will point out that Skyrim is a 13-year-old game, so it obviously is going to be rough around the edges in some ways, and yeah, sure, that is true to a degree. But these specific issues don't really have much to do with limitations in tech or design knowledge. There are plenty of titles from that era that did these elements much better, and a bunch
Yep.
of them were published by Bethesda. For example, Dishonored dropped just a year after Skyrim, and it provided exciting and satisfying first-person melee combat that allowed for tons of player expression due to its movement options and Corvo's supernatural abilities. Even a few years before that, Dark Messiah of Might and Magic had an incredible combat system that rewarded creativity and observation of the environment while also having solid and varied swordplay. As for the role-playing
Man, I really miss like environmental combat. Like Skyrim, I think tried doing this for 2 dungeons or something, where you could shoot down these jars with oil in them that would also catch on fire once the pot broke. And then sometimes you could just find like some oil in the ground which you could set fire to, but that's basically the extent of it. And it's also very disappointing when you can clearly see that a chandelier is held up by the same rope that the jar of oil is held up by, but you can't shoot down the chandelier.
Fallout New Vegas released in 2010 and has long been praised as one of the most well-written, interesting, and robust role-playing experiences of all time. The point is, they had the ability to create deeper and more fulfilling combat and role-playing systems. They just chose not to. My list of issues with the game goes on, ranging from the overly simplistic puzzles, to the level scaling, to the tedium of travel, to the annoying encumbrance system, and it all adds up to an experience that's easy to look back on as one defined by missed opportunity. Now, despite all of my criticisms, Skyrim became Skyrim, a title that will forever be seen as one of the most important games ever, that people will keep coming back to regardless of how much time has passed. That means something more to those who love it than most games could ever dream of. It doesn't matter that I have issues with it, because it's reached people in a way that few titles ever have or will. And again, that brings me back to the question of, why Skyrim? Despite how it may seem, I'm not trying to be a hater for the sake of being a hater. This isn't meant to be me arguing that game people love bad. I don't want to try to prove to you that Skyrim never should have reached the heights it did, or that you didn't even really like it actually. I just have long felt a disconnect with the game, and genuinely want to understand how Skyrim, a title with so many shortcomings and aspects working against it, succeeded in spite of them. So for the past few months, I've immersed myself in all things to do with the game, reading interviews, researching the release, and replaying it, and I see things a lot clearer now. Of course, it's not the sort of thing that can be boiled down to a single answer. It's a confluence of factors, some circumstantial and some intentional, that enabled Skyrim to become the behemoth it is. And I think it all begins with the audience Bethesda was aiming to capture. Most games out there have a wide range of types of fans, but I've noticed this is especially true with Skyrim. Obviously, there are plenty of longtime fantasy nerds who fell in love with it, as well as RPG lovers, but it also grabbed the attention of a much more casual audience. This is anecdotal, but over the years I've had...
Yes, the filthy ones, right? Even if Skyrim aged poorly, which it most likely did, it's still fun mudding the game as much as you want, even on Xbox One PC, though it's arguably the best place to play Skyrim. Yes, I think you almost have to mod Skyrim to make it playable nowadays. At least that's what the majority of people seem to think. Considering they everyone is like, what mods are you using? Or, try to start up 2,000 mods, but my game crashed. So, I don't think anyone actually plays vanilla Skyrim anymore.
Had many conversations with people who lean on the normie side of the spectrum, where we get on the topic of video games, and I end up asking what their top 3 favorites are. And the majority of the time, their answers have been along the lines of Call of Duty, FIFA, and Skyrim. There are so many people who have played Skyrim that you wouldn't have expected to play Skyrim.
You know what? That actually makes a ton of sense. Because I've long theorized that the people who really enjoy Skyrim hasn't really played RPGs or the kind of game Skyrim is. Because if they did, they'd probably compare them. And Skyrim usually doesn't win out ahead in those comparisons.
don't play anything else remotely similar to Skyrim. Yet, despite it being a single-player fantasy game, it appealed to these kinds of players anyway. One major reason for this had less to do with the game itself and more to do with the cultural landscape of 2011, primarily how fantasy was moving into the mainstream. Fantasy is an interesting genre in that it feels niche in a lot of ways, and for a while it was, but over the past 20 years or
Also, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. It's just really interesting.
so, it has become no longer just for the nerds. One of the biggest contributors to this shift was the Lord of the Rings trilogy, which released in the early 2000s and achieved levels of success that no one could have ever expected, creating a demand for more stories that felt like it. This gave fantasy games a much larger target demographic to aim towards, helping...
It's really sad though that many of Bethesda developed games nowadays need to be modded just so that they be fun to play or even playable. It really says a lot about the base games themselves. Yeah, it does. It says a lot about Bethesda too. I mean, it's been a joke for a long time that Bethesda basically just leaves bug fixing to the fans, right? And in some aspect, it's true.
Many titles in that space become even more relevant. Now, the success of Lord of the Rings definitely helped Skyrim in some ways, but a different fantasy series played a much more impactful role in its success. That, of course, being Game of Thrones. The show premiered in April of 2011 and was an immediate success. There were nearly 10 million average viewers per episode, not including the many more people who pirated it, and that first season laid the foundation for the cultural phenomenon it would eventually become. Its grounded story, filled with multifaceted and relatable characters, helped give it a broad appeal even with all of its fantastical elements, getting even more people who had never been interested in the genre to not only watch the show, but to also buy the books. And once folks caught up to whatever was out at the time, many wanted to keep experiencing stuff like Game of Thrones. Just 7 months after the pilot aired, Skyrim released, a game that takes place in a snow-covered region largely inhabited by people who are seeking independence from the rulers to the south that heavily features a civil war and dragons. Obviously, the game wasn't inspired by the success of the show, as all of these aspects were developed long before it premiered, but some of them were definitely inspired by the books.
Did Season 1 actually feature dragons that much? It's been so long, I don't remember, but... Did it?
Todd Howard saying, people in our studio liked it, and it seeped in a bit to what we were doing. What's more interesting is that apparently before Skyrim...
Wait, hang on, that was like less than a year before Skyrim launched. How could it... There's no way they wouldn't like be at this stage at that point. Like in April of 2011. Skyrim released in November of 2011. I mean, there's just no way they had the time to take any inspiration from that, right? I mean, the whole dragon and Nordic style would already be set in stone, right?
In development, George R. R. Martin's team reached out to Bethesda.
Maybe it was the books, but definitely not the TV show.
Game set in the world of A Song of Ice and Fire, but Bethesda decided they'd rather make a game in their own world, which does make the similarities between the two feel a little funny in hindsight. To be clear, the two properties have tons of differences, and also a lot of the things they have in common are popular fantasy tropes and ideas from real-world histories and mythologies. So while some influence from A Song of Ice and Fire clearly exists, it'd be unfair to say Bethesda just copied George R. R. Martin's homework. Regardless, the parallels between the two created a synergy that benefited both properties. They acted as
where I can play many excellent indie-based games and get a lot of enjoyment out of them, even without mods. Heck, mods might as well be a bonus for most indie games rather than a necessity. Yeah, definitely. But like indie games usually they're small in scope and they have a really core gameplay core, whereas Skyrim is designed to be more open. However, I still like the focus of indie games better than the lack of focus in Skyrim.
as a sort of funnel to the other, and given that Game of Thrones was such a massive gateway into fantasy for so many new people, I think this was especially beneficial for Skyrim. Whenever someone, whether it be a longtime fantasy fan or a person newer to the genre, wanted to play or experience something that felt similar to Game of Thrones, Skyrim was the obvious choice.
I mean, okay, look at this landscape. The colors are so muted. Maybe this is just because of the times, right? The whole brown and gray stuff, Call of Duty and all of that. But it's so muted, even compared to Morrowind.
No other game at the time came anywhere close to matching the show's scope and tone until The Witcher 3 came out in 2015.
And then look at Witcher. Even like The Witcher has a lot of color and stuff like that. And Game of Thrones too, I'm pretty sure has some color to it, even though it's supposed to portray like this kind of grim fantasy setting.
Closest thing there was to a Game of Thrones game. And that's kind of wild, as there actually was a Game of Thrones game, and it was something. While this synergy was largely coincidental, Bethesda did seemingly capitalize on it with their marketing, most notably with the live-action trailer that came out a few weeks before the game did. It is very Game of Thrones coded. Honestly, it could have easily been mistaken for a Season 2 teaser trailer. When asked about the similarities, Pete Hines, Bethesda's former VP of Marketing and Communications, said, "If people say that looks like Game of Thrones, we're in the right place in terms of mood and vibe and tone. If that's the impression we're leaving, that's a good thing, as opposed to this must be for some new video game." By airing a trailer that evoked a similar feel to the show, it signaled to anyone who had watched Game of Thrones, if you like that kind of storytelling, you'll like this as well. Now, Skyrim's success with more casual gamers can't solely be attributed to the Game of Thrones effect. It certainly helped, as fantasy had never been more in demand than it was during the show's run, but there's way more to it than that. Not to mention, Bethesda wasn't just looking to bring in fans of Game of Thrones, they wanted to go well beyond. And in their effort to do that, they ran one of the most effective marketing campaigns of all time. Even with the popularity of the genre growing, Bethesda still faced the challenge of figuring out how to market a high fantasy game to a mainstream audience. In a talk that a few members of Skyrim's marketing team gave at the Game Marketing Summit in 2012, they discussed how they didn't want to apologize for what the game was, but did want to find a way to present it that felt more approachable. To do this, instead of featuring the wide range of mechanics in the game, they leaned more into Skyrim's cinematic elements. This is evident with the live action.
What
trailer,
cinematic
but also
elements?
the game's official trailer. There's narration about a coming threat, cuts between an intricately carved wall that seemingly contains some sort of prophecy, a person running, and something that seems to be chasing them, and it culminates with a confrontation between a dragon and the game's hero. It then pulls out and shows off many of the locations across the world, as well as the various ways you can fight against the threats you'll face. After an action-packed montage, it cuts back to the hero who defeats the dragon and absorbs its power, an experience you'd expect to be exceedingly rare, but then the camera pushes out again, showing a stunning landscape with another dragon casually perched on some old ruins. Not only does this provide viewers with an easy little story to follow and be intrigued by, but
I remember seeing a YouTube video by Luke Steffens where he talked about someone from Bethesda who was talking about focusing less on the story and everything else about the game. Which is kind of weird because it feels like they didn't focus on the story, but it also feels like they didn't focus on anything else about the game, like the combat or any of the mechanics. I don't know. I have no idea where the focus went with Skyrim, which really hurt their games, especially in the long run. Oh, right. Well, yes, but also, where is the focus? I don't think I can point to one single thing about Skyrim that is like, okay, this is the main focus. Other than, okay, maybe the quests, but in a very piecemeal way. Like, it feels like 3 people sat down and made a quest line where they each made one part and then just mashed them together, kind of. Don't know if that's a good description, but
it also shows off how much bigger the world is than this single moment. It promises a game with countless epic encounters, with a new dragon around every corner, an experience that is bigger than you can imagine. The cinematic approach allowed them to portray the fantastical elements of the world in-game in a way that didn't feel like nerd shit. But for the nerds watching, they could easily see all of the nerd shit within it, making it effective for both audiences. One issue with presenting a limited view of a game in this way is that buyers may feel lied to when they get their hands on it and it doesn't end up playing anything like they thought it would, but Skyrim largely avoided this. Where a lot of cinematic trailers at the time didn't really resemble the gameplay or even visuals of the title in the slightest, Skyrim's was made in-engine, so what people saw largely was what they ended up getting. Also, even though the majority of the game is filled with slower moments, there are still plenty of these epic encounters, and as so many of them are unscripted, they're always exciting to come across.
You can't say that about a dragon. You can't say that a dragon is exciting to come across when it's like the same fight for every single dragon. It's just impossible to feel excited about going up against a dragon in Skyrim. Impossible.
Furthermore, these slow moments that the game is kind of defined by help accentuate the ones that aren't. The downtime is a necessary part of making them feel special. It just doesn't make for the best advertising. The trailer presents a version of Skyrim many players might think they want, one filled with constant action and adventure, and then the game provided them with one that most would actually want. One still with tons of action and adventure, but also enough time to breathe in between so it never becomes exhausting. This same philosophy was also utilized by the marketing team in regards to how they rolled out information. Instead of constantly promoting...
Not including Doom 2016, because that seemed more like an id Software decision rather than a Bethesda decision to focus a little on the story. Yeah. I mean, Doom 16 is basically gameplay mechanics for game, right? Well, or maybe shooter mechanics, the game. Feels like Doom's 2016 does a lot to just keep the player engaged. Much more than Skyrim does.
In the game, they valued restraint, aiming to keep information low in the hopes that, in the words of Aaron Losey, Bethesda's current VP of Global Marketing and Communications, they would keep people hungry for more content. The campaign started on December 11th, 2010 with the announcement trailer, and was followed by the official trailer a few months later. But after that, they scaled back a fair bit to not oversaturate their messaging. They showed off a few demos at events, but for a good while, there wasn't a ton of information about the game beyond the main trailers. This strategy offered tons of room for speculation and intrigue, causing a lot of conversations about the game to be fan-driven as opposed to marketing-driven. And it worked. People talked about it regularly and even started memeing about aspects of the game well before it released. This kind of strategy has become pretty popular with established studios, as once a series has found success, there will likely be a base of fans that can be relied on to generate hype for whatever is next. By not revealing too much, it allows players to imagine all the possibilities of how it might be to play and avoids running the risk of fans becoming worn out from hearing about it too much. This is what FromSoft and Bandai Namco did with Elden Ring, it's what Nintendo did with Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, and it's what Rockstar is currently doing with GTA 6. After the success of Oblivion as well as Fallout 3, Bethesda was more popular than ever, and so the anticipation for what they did next was high. By only giving sparse updates, they were able to stoke the anticipation.
Yes. But I think we can also say that some of the marketing towards Skyrim was a bit misleading. I mean, the entire gameplay demo. I mean, maybe not misleading, purposefully misleading, but kind of like by omission of stuff. Clever, I guess, but still somewhat misleading.
Always leaving people wanting more, and then right before release, ramped things up dramatically. It was in this final push that they released a live-action trailer, as well as a bunch of informational ones aimed at more dedicated fans, providing material for folks belonging to all the various demographics they were targeting. And during that span, it was hard for Skyrim not to be on the brain. Along with their successful ads, they also threw a lot of stuff at the wall to see what might stir up conversation. The wildest of which being an offer they issued 9 months before the game came out, where anyone who had a kid on Skyrim's release date and named them Dovahkiin would get free Bethesda games for the rest of their life. Which frankly was a bad deal then, and is a worse deal now. But of course, someone did it. Bethesda's marketing campaign paid off massively, with Skyrim selling 10 million copies in its first month, surpassing Oblivion's lifetime sales. And the team racked up all sorts of marketing awards as well. It helped expose the game to a new audience and drew them in enough to actually buy it, while also still catering to their longtime fans. Now, no matter how timely or well-marketed a title is, if the game itself is terrible, it will have a short lifespan. So based on what I said about its major mechanics before, you'd think Skyrim would have suffered that same fate, especially because those complaints aren't all that unique. People have been bringing them up since it came out, and I've even seen plenty of diehard fans admit that many of them are shortcomings. But despite that, Skyrim has never stopped thriving. People love playing it, even though it has problems. After starting a new playthrough...
I still think that is because it spreads its net, so it casts its net so wide that it appeals to people who don't normally play these types of games, like he said earlier in the video. And then they have nothing to compare it to, essentially. And that doesn't make the flaws stand out as much as they do for other people who play games like this regularly.
Of the game and approaching it with as open of a mind as possible. In my estimations, at least, there are two main reasons for this. The first being that most of the ways in which Skyrim is quote-unquote bad were designed that way in order to be approachable to the wide audience they had just captured. There's this talk I think about a lot.
Oh,
Derek
yeah, so he's just gonna repeat what I just said.
He discusses the idea of spiky design versus soft design. Essentially, spiky design is stuff that causes friction for the player, that sometimes feels unintuitive, but gets them in a state of focus and at its best creates this sense that they are in a world that could exist without them. Where soft design is stuff that prioritizes player comfort, always aiming to avoid negative emotions in regards to interactivity so that players have a smooth experience. All games contain some amount of both types of design, but generally lean one way or the other. Skyrim has a ton of soft design. Many of its mechanics feel frictionless. That's not to say there are never obstacles that slow the player down or even halt their progress, but for the most part, all of its major systems are easy to engage with and can be engaged with regardless of the type of character you've made. So even though I find the combat to be shallow and boring, the fact that it isn't skill-based means pretty much any player can succeed in fights as long as they have potions on hand and keep upgrading their perks and gear. It's not the most engaging, but it also doesn't box many players out.
Making each dragon fight the same as the oh, right. I get that designing and making new animations for each dragon takes a while to make, but that still doesn't excuse making each dragon fight the same as the first. Yes, 100%. I mean, they could have had like 5 different dragons or something, but instead every single dragon is the same mechanically. Right?
With the role-playing, as many choices boil down to simple binaries with somewhat predictable outcomes, it lessens the risk of decision fatigue, and also players don't have to worry nearly as much on how a choice might impact them moving forward. In general, there isn't much the player can get locked out of based on their choices. With the exception of the Civil War quest line, doing something for one faction won't stop you from doing something for another, so there rarely are meaningful consequences to actions, which is appealing to those who worry about missing things and messing up their game. Ultimately, a lot of design in Skyrim seems to be centered around the player always moving forward and progressing in one way or another. Like, this is why it has level scaling. It makes it so that in most cases, if the player finds a quest they want to do, they can do it right away. For those who just want to do the main quest, that's an option. And for those who want to do whatever random tasks they stumble across, that is too. And the softness of Skyrim doesn't stop there. It can be seen with the simplicity of the puzzles and the ability to engage with any skills and the leveling system in general. In a lot of ways, Skyrim doesn't want to get in the player's way. It wants to get them through the door in the hopes that they'll stay a while. I think this was more than enough for a large portion of the player base, especially the more casual gamers Skyrim was able to bring in. A lot of them just wanted something mildly engaging that they could sink a lot of hours into over a long period of time, and Skyrim provided just that. It's a rare single-player game that can compete with multiplayer titles in terms of potential worthwhile playtime. I still believe that Skyrim would have been a much better game if its combat and role-playing asked for more from players, but I also think far more people would have bounced off of it if that were the case. With all that said, Skyrim's long-term appeal is deeper than it being designed in a way that is approachable to everyone. While it certainly leans pretty heavily on the side of soft design, it does have a fair bit of spiky design as well, a lot of which helps accentuate my favorite bits of the game. For instance, it does a lot of stuff that cultivates a powerful sense of place. Every object in the game is a physical thing that can be interacted with. They can be picked up and moved around.
Well, not quite.
Much of a purpose, but the interactivity feels nice regardless. Presenting items in this way often makes it slower to collect them, as they aren't just bundled up in a glowing light that you know will be worthwhile to grab. Instead, you need to sift through things, picking them up one by one, which in some cases, like when there are a dozen gold pieces on a table, can feel excessive, but it also creates an almost tactile sense to the things you're engaging with. You have to spot what you might need and decide what's actually useful and what will just waste space in your inventory. Honestly, the encumbrance system in general pushes you to always think about the items you're carrying. I do have issues with how it's incorporated, but at the very least it prompts some level of thoughtfulness about what you're grabbing. I think it could be argued that the game's reliance on menuing also adds to this feeling, as even with hotkeys there are so many items and abilities you'll likely cycle between that you'll never cover them all. So whether it be the favorites menu or the main menu, you'll be pausing the action regularly and scrolling through everything you have, as there is no real way to sort stuff to get to the things you want to use, in theory reminding you about all the other things you have at your disposal. While these breaks in action can be annoying, they also lead to some incredible moments where you notice something far more useful in your inventory than what you were looking for that helps you overcome a challenge. Furthermore, even though the game scales to your level, there are some enemies placed around the world with set levels and others who start at a much higher level than the Dragonborn before they start scaling. This leads to some big difficulty spikes where you need to figure out how to deal with an enemy that you don't have a good chance of defeating by typical means. On this playthrough, I was given a quest from the companions to take out some vampires, and it all felt like an appropriate challenge until just before the end, where a master vampire blocked my way. As I was far under his level and had no shot of out-damaging him, I instead kited him over to a ledge, charmed him so he wouldn't be hostile, lined things up as best as I could, and then somewhat messily knocked him off. And it felt so good to do. Admittedly, more often than not, these spikes will probably push players to just run away, but they can also spur creative thinking, which makes them valuable. The dragon attacks are another example of this. When they pop up, your travels become far more treacherous, and it can lead to some interesting interactions, like when a blood dragon attacked me as I was running by a giant and the two of them started fighting, so I stood from a distance doing what I could to support my new giant friend. This all adds a layer of excitement to what can often be just a dull walk. Honestly, even the fact that the game doesn't have interesting movement mechanics means your focus will mostly be on just looking around, helping you get a better lay of the land and appreciate the beauty of the place you're in. I'm not saying all of these things are perfectly done. I'm not even saying that Bethesda incorporated every single one of them with this exact result in mind, but I do think their friction has an effect, and for the most part that effect makes players consider the space they are in and the various things that are in it in a way a lot of games don't. Skyrim's major mechanics are soft, making it massively approachable, but many of its minor ones are spiky, creating a thorough connection between the player and the world without running the risk of them getting stuck. This, mixed with Skyrim's massive scope, creates a unique kind of immersion, one that is more concerned with the small moments than the big ones. But as there are so many small moments to be had, it all adds up to something more substantial. There are so many interactions to experience. You can explore almost any place you see. You can grab a fish from a line. You can pick up a mug from a table. You can find ants crawling on tree stumps. You can drop something on the ground and it will still be there 20 hours later. There are roaring rivers, lush forests, and northern lights
Well,
that paint...
lush forests. Right.
and northern lights that paint the night sky. Characters go about their lives regardless of if you are there and have conversations with each other about insignificant things. And every moment is accompanied by impeccable sound design and an all-timer soundtrack.
I do like the idea of having companions that I can choose romance with, though. I can't comment on how Skyrim handles that. Let me know what you think of the companion system in Skyrim. Haven't really messed with it yet, but any companion you get through the main quest, at least, has basically mostly just been in the way. And it's not like you actively talk with them either. Like, they're just kind of there and helps you fight. That's it. For the most part. Unless it's like some kind of story beat where they need to explain something or whatever. Then they're just there, kind of.
Frankly, a lot of this stuff doesn't really matter in terms of what could be considered the core of the game. They aren't part of the gameplay loop, and most don't even serve a functional purpose. But they are still there, and can be encountered everywhere. Even though the combat and role-playing don't feel like they have much weight to them, the world itself does. It feels alive. And while the game does frequently show its seams and break the powerful sense of immersion it builds so well, it never takes long to slip back into it by coming across something new. In the documentary, You're Finally Awake, 9 developers recount the making of Skyrim, there's a quote from Dennis Mahiones, one of the game's character artists, that I keep coming back to, which is, "It's not that we did any one thing first or any one thing better, it's that we did it all for the first time." The thing is, it's not just that they did it all for the first time, It's also that no other game has really done it all again since, at least not to the same degree. And this is the other major reason I think Skyrim continues to be so popular to this day. No other game feels like it. Sure, plenty of open world titles have incorporated ideas from Skyrim, but the vast majority of them have taken far more influence from the likes of Assassin's Creed and Grand Theft Auto. Most are action focused, have third person perspectives, and offer far less unnecessary interactivity. This makes leaner games that are often more fun to play on a moment to moment basis, but they lack the slow burn that makes Skyrim Skyrim. What I've come to realize through replaying Skyrim and talking to others about it is that for a lot of people, the reason they keep coming back isn't because they want to defeat Alduin or become the head of the Thieves Guild. It's not because they care about maxing out their armor or getting the most powerful spells. It's that they just want to recapture the wonder of being part of a fantastical world that feels realized in a unique way, that isn't always concerned with every aspect adding to the gameplay. They might want to experience this for just 1 hour, or they might want to for 100. But ultimately, it is less about the experience of playing through the game than it is about playing in it. For these reasons and more, Skyrim has created a loyal following. By appealing to a massive audience but delivering an experience that feels deliberate in significant ways, they hooked millions of people. And many of those people are willing to buy multiple versions of the game so that they can keep stepping back into an experience only it really offers. Many also have the desire to regularly mod it in order to get a fresh experience of what they first fell in love with. Honestly, Skyrim is kind of the perfect game to be modded because it has so many systems with the potential of being far more interesting than they currently are. And Bethesda deserves a ton of credit for recognizing that their fans would want to mod the game and providing tools to help them do it more easily. Skyrim rides an interesting line of being for everyone and for no one. I can't say examining it in this way has made me fall in love with it. I do still find myself wishing it was a much better game, or at least more suited for my tastes.
Okay, so to his point, about no one having done what Skyrim does, I think no one has done what Skyrim does because it's kind of a bad idea. I mean, it's too unfocused. Lately, when people are making like open world games, they tend to have kind of a very strong core gameplay loop, like The Witcher 3, Elden Ring. But Skyrim is kind of like you talked about earlier with the soft game design. The entire thing is kind of just a pillow that you lay your head on, and that's it. Combat is shallow, magic is shallow, the story is shallow, exploration is shallow. I don't know, the entire game just kind of feels shallow. Have I said that word enough times yet?
But also, I think there is a ton of value in it being an entry point to video games, or at least these kinds of video games, for so many people. Skyrim came out at a perfect time to reach a new audience, and Bethesda did a stellar job in grasping that audience and designing a game that wouldn't push them away, while also putting in enough jagged edges to make things feel meaningful. The world is worth revisiting because in ways it feels like a real place, a place you'd be lucky to see with your own two eyes, a place that begs the question, why not Skyrim? If you also hate getting over-encumbered, you should check out this video sponsor, Bellroy.
Okay. Alright, okay. Good video, I guess. Certainly gave me something to think about. But I don't think it was a lot of new stuff, right? Final thoughts. Skyrim's kind of a shallow experience. It was designed as an introduction for casuals into the fantasy adventure genre. No, I'm not gonna call Skyrim an RPG because it's not. It's not an RPG. And yeah, they threw their net wide, caught a lot of small fish, but ultimately it's just not as mechanically sound as even the games that came before it. It does a lot, but it doesn't do anything well. Jack of all trades, master of none. Whew, okay. Oh, this went on for far longer than I expected. I did have one more video in mind, but it's getting kind of late. Let's see. Check my log. So it was the 13 years of Skyrim video, but I was thinking of only watching the main quest part, but I'm having second thoughts about this because I kind of want to play the game more now because of those two previous videos before I continue with the work stream stuff. I think I need more insight because right now I've basically only done the main quest of Vanilla Skyrim. I've defeated Alduin, and then I've done the main quest in the Dragonborn DLC. I defeated Mirok. So I definitely think I need more insight by playing the game more. I get that ads are necessary for YouTube to make some revenue, but it's still annoying to get ads in general, especially when that can somewhat mess with the pacing of the video. Not any YouTuber's fault, mind you. Yeah, true. Although I have YouTube Premium, that was a sponsored ad thing at the end of the... Also, it was like at the end of the video, so it gets a pass. But yeah, been going for almost 2 hours at this point. But I think we're going to end off there. Thank you everyone for dropping in. I really appreciate it. It's fun chatting with people while also watching videos and discussing them. So yeah, I really appreciate it. And there might be a stream next weekend. I don't know for sure. It depends on how much I'm gonna get to play. But it's actually a challenge to play Skyrim because I find it really boring. So I almost have to force myself to play it, which I think speaks enough for what I think of the game. But like I said, I've only been doing the main quest, and the main quests are, well, notoriously bad. So maybe it will get better once I get out in the world and do some side quests and, you know, the Mages College or Fighters Guild or whatever. But yeah, I think we're gonna end it off here today. Everyone take care, and I've been chatting with everyone. I hope to see everyone again soon. Yeah, same. So, see y'all later. Where's the stream thing? Bye.